You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 61. Today, we're talking all about how to leverage the power of podcasting. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Another listener question of the week here on the Mind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, James Wedmore.
And I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And this is a very special episode because we're going to talk about podcasting. So we've got a question. We'll share it in a minute from Dr. Joanne Tully. And you know what? We've been doing this for 8 months, 10 months.
Well, now officially probably about a year because technically we recorded our episodes.
Yeah, more than a year ago. Yep.
Yeah.
We kind of recorded a bunch and then never did anything with it. Don't get me started on that. So we're going to talk about, we've already got the notes for this, the pros of podcasting, the cons, right? Should I be doing podcasting or not? And then if you do decide that you don't want to just be a listener, you want to be a content creator of your own podcast, we're going to share with you 21 easy to implement tips and tactics and cool strategies that we've learned from others that have helped us and just, the hard knocks experience of podcasting. All come in here today's episode, so let's get into it.
So this question comes from Dr. Joanne Tully, and she says, "Hey there, James and Phoebe. Love your podcast. I look forward to listening each week." Thank you for that. My question is this: what are the pros and cons of starting a podcast versus recording some audio clips and linking them to my social media and email list? What are the costs involved with starting a podcast, and what advice and tips can you give us? As always, you guys rock. Peace and love, Joanne.
Peace and love. Thank you, Joanne. We really appreciate the comment. So the first thing I want to say here is that I really do believe that the question of should I do a podcast or just record some audio clips, I think either way, let's just call it a podcast because that's what it is. It's just recording. It's consumable audio. Okay, so let's just go ahead and assume that, you're going to be super coachable, which I know you are, Joanne, and just say, well, let's just call it a podcast. So we now need to look at whether or not you want to start a podcast. Because as you'll see as we kind of go through this, that's really what it is that we're doing. It's just audio clips that are linked to a blog that we share also on iTunes and on social media. So to me, don't you agree? Is the same thing?
I do. Yep. And when we were looking at that, I was like, well, I think the question is yes or no. And actually, I went to a talk that was like, why you shouldn't start a podcast. I thought that was a great title. And really, it just came down to it's content and whether or not you want to monetize it and all this stuff. But that's kind of, when I read her question, I was like, really? She's just asking yes or no.
Yeah.
And how. Really.
Yeah. So this should really first, is a 2-part episode. First, we're going to say, the pros and cons. Should you? We're not here to convince anybody of a podcast. And then we'll get into some tips if you either have one or are thinking about it. So who did decide yes that they want a podcast?
Who's that?
Kate and Mike of the Kate and Mike Show, our good friends, which we had on the podcast, Kate Northrup, and they started a podcast together.
Have you listened to it yet?
I've listened to the first 30 minutes or the first half of the first episode.
Yeah, I listened to the first one. It was really good. It's really entertaining to hear other, I'm not used to having 2 hosts other than ours. So it was interesting to see their dynamic.
I'm not used to the 2 hosts, except when I have to deal with another host on my podcast. Yeah. So if you guys want to go check out, we've had Kate on the show before. It was a great episode, The Margin of Magic. You can head on over to katenorthrup.com/podcast to go check out their podcast. I highly recommend you check it, download it, search it. It's the Kate and Mike Show on iTunes. So let's get into it. Pros, cons of podcasting. We want to be as real, transparent as possible. We're not trying to convince anybody of podcasting here. I do love it for the right person. And I've had this conversation with people because people ask me, why aren't you on YouTube as much anymore? And it's a very simple answer for me that I have to share. I think it'll kind of convey the pros and cons of podcasting. So for me, when I'm teaching things like how to set up your video studio, talking about video marketing and YouTube marketing, those topics lend themselves to video. But as I've transitioned to talk much more about the things that we end up talking about here on the Mind Your Business podcast, those are things that, I want to go deep with. I want to talk for 40 minutes, not 3.5. And that needs a different medium and a different platform. And so we've chosen this. So it's not because I like one or the other better at all. I still love YouTube and video in general, not just YouTube, but, like Facebook video and other types of videos that we do. But I like them both. So let's talk about, we've got 3 pros and actually 4 cons, don't we? Let's talk about the 3 pros of podcasting. Phoebe?
Yeah, so the first one is that it's quick to create. When we get on, when we turn on our microphones, we have already spent probably about, what would you say, like 10 to 15 minutes with an outline and getting some key points down. And so as far as, creation, it's really easy to do. So quick to create, very easy, big pro.
And, I have to contrast this to something like YouTube. If I'm going to make a highly produced, engaging YouTube video, I've had videos take all day for one 5-minute video. So one 5-minute video can take all day or half a day. A 40-minute podcast can take us like 41 minutes. Yeah. So there's the trade-off. Okay, let's look at the next pro. So it's just definitely like quicker. Get the content out there quicker. The second pro is what I call a higher log time. So if you could count the amount of minutes that people log with you, I believe that the more time they log with you, the more that increases their chances of purchasing from you. Because like, know, and trust increases. In fact, there was a study done, of course I forget the study now, of the law of proximity and how that affects attraction levels. So what they did is they showed pictures of different guys to a woman, and she rated their attractiveness. And it was something like to the effect that they rated them, and then like 2 or 3 weeks go by, and then they showed the pictures again, and one of the guys, the attraction levels went up. And what had happened is over those 2 or 3 weeks, she had seen that one person more frequently. Like he would walk back and forth past her building or something like that. I forget. It's been a while. But the point was of the study is that the more she saw him, the more her attraction levels went up. And so we could relate this back to business to say the more people have frequency of you. Because you can imagine that a woman wants someone, she can trust. Like, I don't want some stranger that I don't trust and can't feel safe around. And that could have one element, one ingredient as part of attraction. And so I think as buyers, we want the same thing. We want to be around people that we trust. And I think you're increasing that trust and that relationship and that rapport. You get to know, but there's that more familiarity. So what I'm getting at here, guys, James, Phoebe, is that with a podcast, you have the opportunity to have that longer log time. A YouTube video, don't get me wrong, it's engaging, but the chances of keeping someone on a video, watching a video for 40 minutes is lower than 40 minutes on a podcast. Because you could be doing other things while you're podcasting. You could be driving. You could be listening to this entire episode while you're driving, and it could be an hour long, and you had an hour drive to get somewhere, and you're not sitting there saying, God, just get on with it, right? You're saying, wow, that was really awesome to listen to that while I was driving, so I'm not just sitting in traffic.
When I do it while I walk. So I'm like getting exercise and I'm listening to podcasts.
7-figure walking.
Exactly. There you go.
We've never told that story. Can I tell the story publicly now? It's been a while.
This is embarrassing.
So one of the things that we always stumble with is coming up with names for the episodes. I think that's a tip for you. Naming your episodes is going to be really important. We've seen a difference. We've seen episodes that we loved that went not nowhere, but they had the lowest amount of downloads, relatively speaking, and then we looked and it was like, the name is just so crappy. So we always want to spend some time coming up with names, and we did this great episode with our good buddy Derek Halpern, and it was all about walking. And so, it's like we want to make sure people know that this isn't just about walking, something that we've learned very young in our life and just take for granted, that this had something to do with like our health and how do we get people's attention about this is important, even though it's about the most mundane topic you could ever think about. And as a joke, I texted Phoebe and said, how about 7-figure walking? And next thing I know, she runs with that. And I'm going for a walk because we're all inspired to walk 10,000 steps. And I look down and reload our playlist inside the iTunes podcast app. And sure enough, the latest episode, 7-figure walking. And I'm just, no.
My face is like purple right now.
I'm like,
I just literally I didn't even really think about it. I just kind of copied and pasted it to our editor really quick because I think we did it. Oh, yeah, 'cause it was in my defense.
It was one of those like really spur of the moment, like, hey, we've got an idea. Let's shoot it out right now.
Yeah, and like quick turnaround in a couple hours. And so I was like, oh, and he's like, what's the name?
7-figure walking. And then I really have to start second guess, like, man, I need to tone down the sarcasm and the like jokes a little bit because people have a hard time telling when I'm serious or not. 7-figure walking. Okay, now let's talk about the next pro. So we've got podcasts are the quick to get the content out. You get the opportunity to spend more time with your audience. You're in their ear. Hello in there. And the third thing is I think for the right audience, there is a higher demand with a lower barrier of entry. So in our audience, I can go to people, and I did this over the weekend at the event to test this because I had someone ask me, what's better for me, a YouTube or a podcast? And I said, well, if you service the entrepreneurial audience, and I said, well, look, you're an entrepreneur, right? Yeah, of course. And I said, is there a YouTube channel that you watch religiously? And they couldn't think of one. I said, do you listen to podcasts? They're like, all the time. Yep. That right there is enough. Now, here's the thing. If you're in the entrepreneurial space, that's a huge benefit. But I have people that teach tennis, horse training, guitar, fitness, like everything else needs video because it needs to be visual. I mean, how do you teach the drums in a podcast? I mean, you could, but I think I need some visual if I'm just starting out. I need to see, what are you tapping with your foot there, right? Okay, so high demand and then low barrier of entry. This is what I mean by low barrier of entry. Entrepreneurs, they're busy. So we know our audience is busy, but they're big into mindset, so they know they need the brain fuel, but they don't want to stop everything that they're doing because they love to multitask. You know you do, even though you shouldn't. And so the last thing they want to do is hear a 40-minute video on mindset on YouTube where they have to stop what they're doing and just watch that. So low barrier of entry for me means it doesn't take them out of it. Just like Phoebe said she's walking or you're driving, our audience is doing something else while they're listening. So there's a lower barrier, a lower cost to consume. That's what I should call this, lower cost to consume. I like that better. Those are the 3 pros. Let's talk about, we've got 4 cons here. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to share 2. Phoebe's going to share 2. The first one is the traffic and searchability. Getting found to me isn't as effective as it is with something like YouTube. There's no really SEO. And you could say, that's not true. People could go to the podcast and search. Yeah, but you have to understand that you have to go to podcast first, then search. It's 2 steps, right? Versus someone going to YouTube and saying, I need help with this. And they find a YouTube video or a blog post. So you're not taking advantage of the SEO, search engine optimization benefits of something like a video or a blog. Okay, so I think podcasting could take a little bit more time for the discoverability of it, my opinion. That's one con. The other one is driving traffic from your podcast. YouTube for me is a massive traffic generator. It's so easy to get a click from a video. I can't even begin to tell you. It's so easy. Okay. In a podcast, there's no place to click. You can't put links in your podcasts, in the app where people can just like go somewhere. Now, there are other ways to do it. You could be like, all right, text this number to ba. Or you could be like, go to this, go to jameswilmer.com. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it's not as easy to drive traffic from your podcast to whatever you want to drive them to. Now, it definitely happens, and it definitely works, and it's definitely possible. I'm just saying it's not as easy with something like YouTube or a blog post. Phoebe?
So, James, actually, I was on a plane this weekend, and at the airport, I noticed that you can actually have clickable links inside of your episode description. Yes.
Are you making me look bad and wrong on our podcast?
I mean, yes.
As much as you can, right?
Exactly.
As much as you can. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. Okay, it looks like you can't do it on mine yet, but, I guess I haven't updated. So that's good. That's great. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, they still have to go to, open the app back up or whatever. So I still think there is something where like when I'm in a video and I could say, here, click here, and I like point at it and people can click on it easily. There is some benefit to that. Okay, so let's see. Phoebe, we got 2 more cons, right?
Yep. So the next one is that if you have interviews on your show and you are scheduling guests, in order to coordinate those times with your guests and to make sure that you have, just the setup time, just takes a little bit of time. So I think that's kind of depending on what style of podcast you're going to have. We don't deal with it that much because we don't have that many guests, but moving forward, we are going to be bringing a lot more people on.
And I think the reason we haven't gotten more guests is because we just know how much time it takes to like do the scheduling back and forth, and it's just one more thing. And when there's already 2 people, scheduling 3 people is like herding cats sometimes. So
right. And not only that, but if you don't actually know the person and you have to do a little bit of research and you're reaching out to somebody, an influencer, and then you have to get through the gatekeeper and it's just emailing back and forth, I can imagine that would take a lot of time. So we haven't really experimented that much with that, but I think it's worth noting. And the 4th one is the cost of equipment. So regardless of what you're going to do, there's always going to be some sort of cost if you need to buy any kind of equipment. And we have a great download inside of the show notes.
That's
that you
right.
Can click on. Yep. So you can print it out, you can download it, and it'll show you the equipment that we bought. A lot of research went into that. Many, many hours of my time went into that. And we just kind of made a decision and went with it. And so if you just go look in the show notes and you can download our guide.
It was many hours of your time and many dollars of mine. Exactly. It's a great combination.
Love that.
Yes. Good trade-off there. So yeah, it does cost some money. We don't want to recommend that if you're going to do this, that you do it with, your onboard mic on your laptop or something like that, that you invest in the right equipment, because the biggest complaint we see when we look at negative reviews of other podcasts, they're complaining about the audio quality. So it's like, dude, just fix that. Easy. Okay. So we've got everything that we use to get our system up and running. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. It's like 4 things, really simple. We've got that PDF. I think you don't have to opt in for it. It's free. Download it. Take advantage of that. Can we give the link, or just go to mindyourbusinesspodcast.com?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you'll see the episode in there.
Do it. Awesome. Okay, so pros and cons, but ultimately to make the decision, I think there's 2 things I want to say really quickly before we share our 21 tips with you. Okay, the first is that I think absolutely essential for content marketing, you have to have a platform where you're sharing and distributing your content. So you have to choose what that platform is, right? Be it podcast, something like YouTube, Facebook, a blog, something like that, right? Michael Hyatt, someone who has a podcast and a blog, right? So you have to choose that platform. So number 2 is to really look at, well, where does my audience live? What do they love? What content do they want? And then what medium is best serving my content and my audience? If you're teaching tennis or fitness, it's probably best that you start on YouTube. But if you're teaching like mindset to entrepreneurs, yeah, that's like a no-brainer. It needs to be on a podcast. So something to think about there. If you have made the decision, all right, James, Phoebe, I'm in. I'm going to do a podcast. Or perhaps you have one and you're looking for tips. These are 21 lessons that we have learned in a year plus of podcasting that we want to bestow upon you to help you on your journey to further podcasting. So without further ado, let's get into those 21 tips. Rip. That was my transition. All right, podcasting tip number 1, start with a core premise. Now, this is huge. Most people don't do this. However, you are going to, aren't you? This is your big idea. This is the theme for your podcast. It's not necessarily the promise of your podcast. It's the theme. It's the big idea that you want to get across. So here's how you do this, right? Because this is tough. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this. But basically, if someone were to watch all your episodes and then forget about everything but one thing, what would be that one thing that you want them to remember 6 months to a year from now? That's a big friggin' question. What's the one thing that you'd want them to remember a year from now if they forgot everything else? That's the essence of a core premise. It's a big idea. And so ours is really about, that hustle and hard work is BS and that entrepreneurship is 90% mental. That's our the essence of our core premise. It shifts a little bit, but that creating success starts from the inside. That's our big idea. Okay. And so every episode then is set out to prove that or further demonstrate the validity of that. So your very core premise should have people say, I disagree. And then you say, great, go listen to another podcast. There are people that say, I disagree. All you need to do is hustle and work hard. Really? I see a lot of people hustling, work hard, and failing, exhausted, adrenal fatigue, hating their life, waking up one day and saying, is this all life is about? So, boom, right? Okay, that's the first one. Yes.
One quick thing is, as opposed to, you don't agree with us, go listen to somebody else, I also feel like maybe they'll want to listen to the next episode to see, okay, like now their curiosity has been piqued, and so now maybe they want to listen to the next one to see, if they'll shift their beliefs a little bit. And that's kind of what we set out each episode to do.
Oh yeah, those are our fence sitters, right? They're like, well, the jury's still out. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. And you'll make some converts out of that.
Awesome. Number 2, which kind of ties into the core premise, is making sure that you have a solid intro and outro, and inside of those, making sure that you communicate that core premise. So ours is really simple. You'll hear it at the beginning and the end of every episode, and it just really talks about what we are hoping to prove and what we're hoping to communicate through each message or each episode.
Yeah.
So,
and you could outsource these, right? They have like fancy, like, you are listening to the Mind Your Business podcast. Or you could just do it yourself. And that's obviously what we did. We edited ourselves too, didn't we? So here were the phases for it. We wrote it down over and over and over again, changing words, getting pieces out, trying to make it succinct as possible. That took a lot of time. And then we found a really cool song. And then I recorded the intro into the podcast and then just kind of mixed the audio with it so it kind of like all work. And it worked out. So you got to have that. You got to have that intro. So what we do is, you can see I'm taking Phoebe's tip, but I wanted to expand on it here, is so we do this whole like, you're listening to XYZ podcast episode 5000. Today we're talking about this topic. Then we do that intro that Phoebe is talking about, and then we get into the show. I mean, I think that's as simple as you could make it here, right?
I like the very beginning part, because people know instantly, do they want to listen to it or do they not? Today we're talking all about podcasting, whatever. And so if that is something they want to hear about, they're going to continue to listen. And I think that's a really important piece of the intro itself.
For totes. So let's talk about tip number 3 for rocking your podcast. And that is to freaking outsource it. Hire someone to manage your podcast. We have a great podcast editor, and you need to do the same. Like, make that an essential thing. Otherwise, just why make your podcast this whole full-time job for yourself? Please don't do that. Your time needs to be spent on creating the content and actually recording yourself, not editing it, not doing the show notes. There are amazing people out there that you can find to do that.
And just great resource. He's been such a great source of information for us, because he also edits other podcasts. So just things that, he bounces ideas off. He'll tell us when things have been updated. So it's just best to be with somebody who knows what they're doing and has been doing this for a while. So
let's say something bad about him too and see if he edits it out.
Definitely don't go with Matt. All right. Number 4 is to batch your episodes. And this is something that we love to do, because it just makes everything just so much easier, as opposed to doing one-off episodes. And we've done those occasionally when we've gotten a little lazy, or we've just been really busy. Actually, it's more like we've been busy.
We love the idea of batching. How about that?
That's a much better way to put it. So it doesn't always happen the way you plan. But for those, we'll just set aside 3 to 4 hours and we'll just run through it. And what the benefit of not just having all that content already done and taken care of and inside Dropbox for our editor, but also, once you start talking and, it takes a couple minutes to get into it, especially for me, I think. And so as soon as we get to like the second or third episode, I feel so much more, in the groove. I found my footing a little bit more, and it just helps the episodes go faster, go smoother, and then just alleviates any kind of headaches down the road when, the night before and you have to record something.
Tip number 5 is to keep it conversational. Now, you're going to have to discover your own voice. It's going to take you some time, but don't try and be the newscaster on your podcast. I think people want to hear you talk. Like, if you were to grab a glass of wine, hang out with some peers, and just like sit over around a fire and just chat about the things that you want to chat about. And the more you can make it feel like that, I think the more it's going to resonate with people. To try and script it, to say, in this episode, you're going to discover the 7 essential ingredients for success. It's just like, hey guys, welcome to the show here. I'm really excited to talk about, I made up a list of 7 things that I feel, it's much more natural. You're going to have to find your own voice. I'm still looking for my voice.
Well, you definitely.
Oh, was that it? Was that it, Phoebe? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how the downloads are for this one. So yes, keep it conversational. Obviously, we're keeping it a little too conversational here, but we like to have fun.
Let's get to the next one. Number 6 is to record 10 episodes before you publish and before you put your podcast out there.
Yes.
And so there are a couple reasons. I know you'll get into one in a second, but for me, it was a lot of, finding your voice. And in those 10 episodes, you get to kind of discover what's working, what's not, and you feel much more comfortable once you have a couple out there. And especially because you're not scrounging around at the last minute to get more out there. And then James, I think your next point is really important.
Well, yeah, because, there's this whole thing called new and noteworthy in iTunes, and you want to hit that, and you have this 8-week window of getting in the new and noteworthy. And we saw our fastest download rate happen during that time. You're getting featured in iTunes. And I think that is a big deal. It is a big way to get found that way. And so one of the metrics that they're looking for is downloads. And so if you only have one episode and you have a raving fan, well, that's one person downloading one episode. It's one download. But if you have one person that loves you and you have 10 episodes, well, that's 10 downloads. So you just 10 extra downloads right there, right? So to come out of the gate strong with a bunch of episodes to listen to, because people binge listen. That was my favorite thing about getting a podcast. People message me on Facebook. They're like, I just binge listened to your entire podcast. I freaking love that, right? So to do that is going to increase your chances, and it's going to increase the downloads, obviously. So I would start with as many episodes as you can. 5 to 10 is a really good place when you launch. And then you want to make sure you've got a bunch lined up, ready to go, at least one a week from there on out.
Great. Tip number 8 is to not forget to ask people to subscribe or review. So obviously you want to make sure that you're getting people that are interested in your podcast. You want them to subscribe so that they just automatically show up in their podcast app. And then for all the reviews, you want 5-star reviews, obviously. And then you just want people to be commenting, and not just for feedback, but also iTunes looks at that as well.
Absolutely.
So don't forget to, make a point of actually asking people to do it.
Number 9 is to use numbers in your episodes. And what we mean by this is when you have that conversational feel, the numbers helps to create structure. So you can see, obviously, in this episode, there's a lot of the banter and conversation, but it's very clearly structured. The first part is ask the question, right? There was a listener question, and then there's the pros and cons, and then there's 21 tips. And so that the numbers creates a very easy structure and flow, but it also lets the listeners to follow along with that and kind of see where you're going with it. So using numbers at any time you can is going to really help you. I think I struggled when we began, Phoebe, because it was like, all right, let's talk about, I remember it was one of the first episodes was like law of attraction in business. And it was like, I felt like an artist with a giant wall of a blank canvas. I'm like, where do you start? I don't get it. And when you can start saying like, well, let's talk about like 7 things you can do, or the 5 steps to this, or the 6 ingredients, it just makes it so much easier to, refine and focus your content.
Definitely. And one other, I know when we talked about numbers, one thing that I wanted to say was at the end of, rather than labeling mindyourbusinesspodcast.com/12 tips to manifesting, whatever, if you just switch that to an actual number, so the actual episode number, it just makes it so much easier to share. Or remember. So if I want to say to somebody, go check out episode number 21, what is coming after the /. So
yes.
Just something to note there. Tip number 10 is to add an advertisement or an ad in the middle and the end of your episodes. So we made it a point not to, we're always approached by sponsors and people that want to, promote to our audience. And we made a decision very early on not to do that. We just wanted to make sure that we protected our audience. And, if we're going to promote something, it's going to be something that we promote or that, that we want and we feel is of value to our audience. So just making sure that when you do have that, put it, if you have an advertisement for a program. I know, James, you did one during your Business by Design program or during your launch. And so we put the ad in the middle and the end.
Yeah, I just got to say, and maybe this is me very controversial here, but I'm just not a fan of having sponsors. And I'm also on YouTube not a fan of putting ads around your videos. Like, if you're in business, stop sending your traffic somewhere else. Stop promoting other people's business with your assets. That's my thing. And I think it's very easy for someone to say, wow, I can get $1,000 a month. That's going to pay for all my podcasting costs. That's a no-brainer. But they're not looking at the opportunity cost. So I think it's just totally bonkers unless you can get some unbelievable deal, like $5,000 an episode. Then we can, let's talk now. All right. But yeah, for me, use your own stuff. Send people to your own offers. Okay. That's my opinion. Speaking of opinions, let's talk about tip number 11. Not too short, not too long. You're going to have to find the sweet spot on this, but there's a lot of people that want to make these really short episodes to game the system. A 5-minute episode means you're going to have a lot of downloads because someone's going to keep listening to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. Too long, and no one finishes, and then they don't feel like they could ever watch another one. I've had that experience with the Joe Rogan podcast. The episodes are 3.5 hours long, and he takes 30 minutes to get into it. I've never had a desire to get back into his podcast again because I feel like I failed listening to it. But I've also listened to podcasts that are really short. And, oh, great, you're gaming the system and getting all these rankings. Good for you. I think that's smart strategically. But I'm having a poor user experience because as soon as, maybe it's just me, but I want to dig deep. I want to, bite my teeth into a topic and, really look at it from every angle. And by the time you start talking about it, you're on to the next one. It's like, all right, today we're going to talk about sales pages. Sales pages need to be long and have good copy and testimonials. See you in the next episode. What? You could do a podcast just on how to write sales pages, let alone a 5-minute episode. So that is my opinion. You want to find that sweet spot. What is that sweet spot? Who knows? 20 minutes? 30 minutes? 40 minutes? That's up to you. You're going to have to play around with that. We like to go longer. We like 45 minutes.
So tip number 12 is to make sure that you're tracking your stats and you're knowing your numbers. This is, I think, pretty standard for business owners anyway, but I also do want to say don't rely too heavily on them. Sometimes you'll have, days that your podcast downloads are off the charts and then other times it's really low. And so I think it's just important to monitor as opposed to, putting all of the emphasis on how many downloads are you getting. So don't rely too heavily on them, but do track so you know what's resonating and what isn't.
Yeah, I think the data really helped us to identify what topics people are resonating with and the headlines, the titles of the podcast that helped us change that. So I think that was important. And that really brings us into perfect segue into tip number 13 for podcasting is quality over quantity. For me, my experience with the podcasting has been if we can increase the quality of the episodes and the content, not just audio quality, the quality of the content, then we don't need to be like the fire hose effect where we just spray as much as we can, right? The one example that comes to mind is that we had an episode that we still to this day have no idea what happened, but it went viral. We started checking our stats, like Phoebe says in tip 12, it's monitor your stats. All of a sudden, the downloads are going up faster than we've ever seen before, and we track it down, and it's to one episode that we recorded weeks ago. We're like, what is this? And it was our Myers-Briggs episode, Know Thy Business, Know Thyself. So someone, somewhere, and this is episode 20, by the way, Know Thyself, Know Thy Business, all about how to do Myers-Briggs. You take the test for it in the episode. And now it's our most downloaded episode by far. It's pretty awesome. Still have no idea what happened.
Yeah. So if you do share it or share anybody's, not just ours, make sure to tag the person because the metrics on the back end aren't, don't actually point. We just know it was somewhere on Facebook, but we don't know who it was or anything. So make sure you do tag the person so they can get involved in the conversation. I know we both were like, I just want to know. I just want to get involved, but we still have no idea who that was. So thank you to whoever that was. Number 14 is ask and listen to what your audience wants. So we have every once in a while, we'll put out a post asking for new questions, for, new topics. And something that kept coming up for us was that people wanted more. And they were like, we want more episodes. We can't wait for Monday. And then it's, once it's over, we have to wait a whole another week. And so we went with 2 episodes a week and just saw our downloads go up and people just seemed to be really happy. And they like the, on Monday we have the longer episodes, and on Thursday we do the audience or listener questions of the week. So make sure that you're listening to what they want, and the numbers don't lie, but also, just going out on your Facebook page or social media and asking what they want and then give them what they want.
All right, podcasting tip number 15. Phoebe actually already said this, but this is to number your episodes to create a custom URL. I think we're not doing this early on, and it just makes it a little bit convenient, especially when you start having a whole slew of episodes, to be able to go back and be like, hey, it's jameswedmore.com/12. Like, it makes it really easy to reference your episodes. So to make the custom URL for each blog post that would hold your episode, just a simple number and just put them in chronological order, I think it just helped us a lot when we need to reference other episodes.
Sorry, I stole that one from you earlier. Number 16 is really just when you find a platform that works, just go with it. So for example, for our hosting, we use Libsyn. We like it. We did a little bit of research. I gave myself a certain window of time, and then I chose it and kind of went with it. So that's what we use and we recommend.
No looking back. Tip number 17 is to make sure you have a strategy for promotion, and you should really be taking the time and effort to promote each episode, whether it's email, social media, leveraging the content, maybe putting up as a video on YouTube or Facebook video, etc. Taking the time to do that. If you're going to take the time to put in all the work to record the episode, you might as well get it to as many people as possible. And another thing to think about here is, can we also add this to our email autoresponders? To continue have it get downloads and listens from months and years to come. I think that's really important.
Now, podcasting tip number 18, consistency is key. Don't kill yourself right out of the gate. I know that there have been a couple conversations I've been in with people who are about to start a podcast. And they're like, I think I'm going to start out with 2 episodes a week. And I'm like, that is the worst idea ever. Just make sure that whatever you choose, there's no right, no wrong, but whatever you choose, that you can be consistent. And I just say, start on the lower end of it. Start with 1 episode a week. Make sure that fits into your schedule, that you can be consistent and show up every week now that you're batching episodes. And that is just going to make it so easy. And then, you have that gauge whether you can kind of bring on more or if you need to just stick with 1 episode a week.
Tip number 19, make sure to include show notes. This is something that I had to kind of mentally wrap my brain around, like, what are show notes? But I'm getting better at it. It's notes of your show. Did I do a good job? No, but to be like referencing them in your episode to make sure that anytime you're going to talk about a book, a link, a website, a person, a place, a thing, that you're creating value with this convenience of saying, here's a place to go that has everything that I talked about. And it recaps the episode. So it's not just about having show notes. It's about having the mindfulness to mention the show notes, which I was not doing for the longest time, and we're getting good at it. Mm-hmm. I'm getting good at it.
I was always good at it.
Phoebe was always good at it.
Number 20. This is definitely my favorite one, and I wanted to make sure that I touched on this because it was very relevant to me, which is go easy on yourself and just be patient. So Rick Mulready, who is a good friend of ours and is also in a mastermind with us, he told me, he's like, it takes the first 20 episodes to really find your voice. And for me personally, I think that was more around like 35. Took me a little while to feel a little bit comfortable. I think with each one I get a little bit better, hopefully. But one tip that I had was, and actually he said as well, was to make sure that you listen to listen back to the episodes themselves. And actually, I just got a really good tip last weekend from a big podcasting kind of guru star person. And he said, for your first 10 episodes, edit the audio yourself. And I thought that was actually really interesting because he says, even if that's not going to be the one that's published, making sure that you go in and you can kind of delete things that you hear, it's just going to make you more aware of the different, little words that you use if you say a lot, or, in my case, I say for me all the time. So those are some tips to help you, I guess, fine tune your speaking, but also, when it comes down to it, just be yourself, go easy on yourself, and just really be patient. You're going to get better as you go.
Okay. And last but not least, actually, it's a little anticlimactic if you ask me. Tip number 21, get some good equipment. Again, we have the free cheat sheet, buyer's guide to all the equipment we use. We can't stress that enough. I've had one of my students who jumped on a podcast and didn't have the best audio to begin with. And I was like, yeah, you got to re-record that. You don't want to have to re-record. So get the right stuff, invest in the equipment, we don't have any regrets from the stuff that we've used, but we also use the equipment for everything else, like webinars and videos and course creation. Don't try and go cheap on that one. Okay, well, there you have it. We covered a lot in this listener question of the week, didn't we? We had the pros, the cons of podcasting, helping you to decide, is it right for you? And if it is right for you, and if you already are running a podcast, we've shared with you 21 quick and easy, actionable tips and lessons that we've learned in over a year of podcasting. And speaking of year, there's definitely another year of this moving forward. We are absolutely loving doing the podcast, the feedback, the support, the questions, just everything about it. It has us so happy and so grateful. So we have many, many, many more episodes to come your way, and maybe, just maybe, 21 new lessons and tips, because we're still stumbling around to figure this out. That's what this is all about, right? So I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.